Hey, what's up guys? Welcome to this video where I'll teach you everything you need to know about CSS Flexbox. So by the end of this video, you should be able to create more awesome and flexible layouts using just CSS Flexbox. So what is Flexbox? Flexbox simply stands for flexible boxes, and it is used to create flexible web layouts. Unlike CSS Grid, Flexbox is supported by most modern web browsers. But generally, you can use either CSS Grid or CSS Flexbox to achieve the same layout. And by combining both CSS Grid and CSS Flexbox, you can create a more powerful web layout. And that is why I highly recommend you to also check out my complete CSS Grid tutorial on this channel. I will leave a link at the description section below. Now, when you look at my code editor here, inside the body, we have a div with a class of container. And then inside this div, we have three other divs. Each of these three other divs have a class name of item. And then individual divs have different class names like item 1, item 2, and item 3. We will use the class of item to apply the general stylings to the three of the divs. But we'll use the item 1, item 2, or item 3 to select each of individual divs. Now, when I jump into my CSS file, we are selecting the div with the class of container and giving it a height of 80vh and a width of 80vw. We are giving it a background of black and a color of white. So the black box here is our container, and our different items are now inside the container. We are selecting all the items here and giving them a 5px of padding, and then we are selecting individual item and giving them different background colors as so. Now the first thing that I want us to do is to learn how we can create a flex container. Now we create a flex container on a parent element which have some child elements, and in this case our container class here have these items which are now the child elements. So we can make this container a flex container by adding a display of flex. So this will make this container to be a flex container, and as you can see, the flow of our content have changed. Now we can change the flow of the content. Right now it's flowing horizontally, and by default display of flex sets the flex direction to row, which makes the content to flow horizontally. And we can change the flex direction using the flex direction property and setting it to one of these ones. You can use row reverse, column reverse, or just row, and the row is the default. So I can set it to column, and now you can see the flow of our content have changed to be vertical. Now in some cases the content may overflow. So for example, if I leave the flex direction to row here and we specify the size of our items, so for example here I can come and set the width to 300px. Now on my browser, when I hit F12, I can resize our viewport width this way, and you can see some content is now overflowing. So we can prevent the behavior by using this property flex wrap, and we can use one of these. By default it is no wrap, but you can use wrap reverse or wrap, and now you can see that our content now is moving to the next line. So if I expand this, you can see we have two of them. If I close, now the three of them are fitting. If the space is not big enough, they are moving to the next section. Now I can place F12 again, and if I decrease and decrease, you can see now they are wrapping to the next line. So flex wrap, you can use it to prevent the overflow, And we have a shorthand for this. When we are using flex direction and flex wrap on the same flex container, you can use the flex-flow. And the first value is the flex direction. You can say row, and then the second value is the flex wrap. I can say wrap. And this will give us the same outcome as this one. So if I remove and try to expand this one, you can see that our items are still wrapping. So the flex flow is a shorthand for flex direction and flex wrap. So right now I will remove this one, and what I want to show you is how we can align our items inside the flex container. But before we do that, you need to understand some CSS Flexbox concepts. Like right now, we added a display of flex inside our container here, which make our container a flex container. But also it sets a flex direction by default to be row. And when I jump at an image here, which I got from MDN, you can see that the flex direction is in arrow and the content is flowing horizontally. In CSS Flexbox, we have what we call a main axis. So when we have the flow of content being horizontal, the main axis is horizontal. And when we have the flow of content being vertical, the main axis becomes vertical. So when we have a flex direction of column, the main axis is vertical. It just follows the flow of content. Now, with this, we can use another property to align our items along the main axis. And this property is justify content. So right here, I can say justify content. And if I say center and come to my page here, I will decrease the size of our items to maybe 100 and close this one. Now you'll see that our items are at the center now. And justify content aligns our items along the main axis. In this case, the main axis is horizontal because the flex direction is horizontal. We can use other properties. You can use flex start, and this is the default. You can use flex end, and they'll move at the end here. In case you want some spacing between our items, you can use space between, and this will create some space between our items. But now we don't have some spacing at the very ends. So to create some spacing at the very end, you can use space around. But right now, the spacing at the very end is not equal to the spacing that is between our items. So for example, if I expand this one, now you can see this is much bigger than these ones. If you want equal spacings, you can use space evenly. And this will create equal spacing between our items and also at the very ends. So just a recap, justify content aligns our items along the main axis. So if we change the flex direction here, flex direction to column, the main axis will now be vertical. And I can remove the width for now. And now when I center the items, they will be centered vertically and not horizontally. Okay. So now let's move to the other property, and I'll remove the flex direction here. The other property is called align items, and the align items aligns the items along the cross axis. Now the cross axis makes a 90 degrees with the main axis, like it's the opposite of the main axis. So if I jump to this image, when we have a flex direction of row, the main axis is horizontal. Now the cross axis is the vertical one. And in this case, we can use the justify content to align our items horizontally, but use the align items to align vertically. So right now, we can center all the content this way. We have justify content of center. I can change the width. to 200 px, and then I can use align items and place it at the center. And now look what we have. If I expand this, the whole of our content is at the center. The align items have changed the alignment of our items from stretch to center. So I can remove the width, we don't need it for now. And when I set the align items to stretch, this is the default. So this is what we had before, but we have center, we have flex, and this will move our items to the very end, and then we have the flex start. We also have baseline, which will align our items depending on our text here, so it will just move at the start here. So you have seen that we can center the whole of our content using justify content center and align items center. And this is actually what I did to center our box here, the box that have a class of container. So if I move here, I have another style sheet which I used. So here I selected all the items, set the padding to 0, margin to 0, and the box sizing to border box. But look at our body. I gave it a height of 100 VH, a width of 100 VW. I added a display of flex to make our body a flex container, and then justify content center, align item center. And this centered our div with a class of container. Now I'll move back to my main.css file, and we have another property we call align content. So if I come here and set the align content, you can use center, flex and flex start, space around, space evenly. So you can use the same values as justify content. But you can see that there is no difference when we use align content. And this is so because this is used when we have multiple lines applied to the flow of the content. So the flow right now is a row, but we have one row. So you can use flex wrap here to add multiple rows to the flow of the content. So if I use flex wrap, now you can see we have 3 rows to the flow of the content, and when I remove align content here, this is what we have. And when I return it, it is aligning them to the center. You can use flex start, you can use flex end, you can use space evenly, space around, space between. So space around, this is what we have. So align content is used when we have multiple lines to the flow of the content. So right now the flow is a row, and we have 3 rows to the flow of the content. But when we don't have it, we don't have to use it. So right now we can just use the align items. So far the properties that we have been using them on the container class here. And we have some few properties which we can use on the items themselves. And the first property that I'll show you is the align self. So on item 1, I can use align self, and this will override the align items property at our container. We can set item 1 to be at the center. And now look, item 1 is at the center, but item 2 and 3 are not at the center. So you can use align self on the individual items. Another property that I'll show you is the order property. The order property can be used to change the positions of our items inside the flex container. And we can do this by using the order property, setting item 1 to order 2. And then we come to item 2, we set the order property to 1. We come to item 3, set the order property to 3. Now look, item 1 is at the center, item 2 is at the first position, and item 3 is at the end. And we have done this even without touching our HTML. So you can use order to manipulate the order of your items inside the Flex container. Now there are 3 other cool properties that I want to talk about, and you can use these properties to control the amount of space that you want your items to occupy. For example, I can set the width of the item here to be 300 px. So this will make the width of all our items to be 300 px. And when I expand, these are 300 px, I can hit F12, and by default you can see that our items decreases their width even without changing the width, like they are just flexible. So this is usually so because of the flex shrink property. For example, if I don't want item 1 to shrink whenever we are decreasing its width, you can use the flex shrink property. So flex shrink, by default this is 1, and that is why they are flexing. I can set it to 0, and when I come back, item 1 won't shrink, but item 2 and 3 will shrink. So if I minimize, you can see item 1 is just static. So you can use the flex shrink property to tell CSS how much an item should shrink. So if I set this one to 2, this item 1 will now shrink more than item 2 whenever we are minimizing the size of our flex container. Now look, item 1 have less spacing than item 2 and item 3. So flex shrink allow an item to shrink if the flex container is too small. We have the opposite of flex shrink, which is flex grow. So right now our items are not growing at all because the default of flex grow is 0. So if I set the width here to 150, you can see that our items are just 150 static. You can use flex grow to make them grow to occupy the remaining space. So flex grow and set it to 1 for item 1. So this will make item 1 to grow, and as you can see, item 1 have occupied the remaining space. If I come back and set flex grow to item 2, so flex hyphen grow, I give it a value of 2. Now item 2 will grow more than item 1. And how this is done is that, let me just first remove these ones. The remaining space will be divided into 3 equal sections. So flex grow of 1 here and flex grow of 2 will make this space to be divided into 3 equal sections. The first section will be given to item 1, the other 2 will be given to item 2. If you want all of them to have equal growth, you can use flex grow on all of them. So I can say flex grow to be 1, and now they'll grow equally and shrink equally. Now, right now we are using the width to specify the initial width of our items, but this is not flexboxy, if I can just come up with that word. So what we use is flex basis. So flex basis specify the initial size of an item before making adjustments using flex shrink or flex grow. So right here I can just say flex hyphen basis to be 150, and now the initial size of our items will be 150 even before we apply flex grow or flex shrink. So right now you have learned about flex basis, flex grow, flex shrink, and we have a shorthand for all of them, and I'll use a shorthand in each one of them. I can say flex, and then the first value here is the flex grow, so I can say 1. The second one is the flex shrink, and the third one is the flex basis. I can set it to 150 px. And now I can come to item 2, add the property flex, which is a shorthand for the three of them. Tell item 2 to grow by 2, to shrink by 2, and to have a flex basis of 150px. And then I can come to item 3 and give it the same values as item 1. So flex 1, 1, and then 150. So right now you'll see that item 2 will occupy more spacing than item 3 and item 1. So this is not clear because of the flex basis. Maybe I can decrease it further to 50px only. And now look, item 2 is much wider because it will take more of the remaining space than item 1 and item 3. And the shrinking of item 2 will also be twice. So you can't clearly see it because it already had so much spacing in it. Now you can use a flex basis of 0. And this is the outcome. There is not much change. But I want to show you a shortcut for these ones. Right now we have a flex grow of 1, a flex shrink of 1, and a flex basis of 0. So instead of using all of these, you can just leave a flex of 1. And this will apply flex grow of 1, flex shrink of 1, and a flex basis of 0. And then you can just use a flex of 2. This will make flex grow to be 2, flex shrink to be 2, and flex basis to be 0. And this will be the same as item 1. And when you look at our outcome, there is not much change. So most of the time, you'll find yourself using flex 1 or flex 2. Now that is all you need to know about CSS Flexbox to create more awesome flexible layouts. So if you enjoyed the content, please make sure to subscribe, turn on post notification so that you don't miss any of my new videos. Also make sure to check out my complete CSS grid tutorial